Well, it's another very warm welcome back, all my vintage dirt bike loving YouTubers, and thanks to each and every one of you once again for retuning to your #1 classic dirt bike TV channel. Now, it appears that since my last video posting, we've had a few more subscribers from over the pond there in the good old US of A, so I'd like to take this opportunity to say hello and thanks very much to all the people stateside for subscribing and of course for viewing my video content, and I do hope you find more material here to amuse you with regards looking at these old vintage race bikes. Now, as we head towards the 12,000 subscriber total, we have some really nice looking bikes coming up here on my channel, and in this next video posting we're going to look at a quite rare Italian machine, and this is a little 125 that many of you may not be familiar with, but we're going to take a look at it now. So without any further delay, let's take a look at this 1970s Moto Gori 125. Now, this very nice looking Italian made Moto Gori 125 never really was a bike at all initially, but was just boxes of old parts that the bike's builder Keith Ree purchased over the internet. Now, Keith's original intention was to use all the parts and then refurbish them and to rebuild this very rare little motocrosser, although with the many other bike building projects that Keith had in his workshop at the time, he was unable to finish the bike off. So he then just handed it over to his friend Terry Pickering to do the finishing touches to this brand new project. Now, it's a bit unclear as to if this bike is a 1974 or 75 model, but it's certainly a mid-70s or thereabouts machine, and as far as I know, it's not a fully original bike, but more than 95% of the machine is certainly as it was back in the day. Now, Moto Gori, or Officina Meccanica Gori as it was originally known, was actually founded by Giancarlo Gori way back in the 1960s. Now, early Gori motorcycles were little 50cc off-roaders that were used mainly for motocross, enduro and trials events, and they also ventured into building road racing machines, and they even built a few little mini motorcycles. Now, with this being a thoroughbred Italian manufactured bike, as you can see, it had very nice Italian styling, and it was quite a good looking piece of kit, and not unlike the Honda CR125 Elsinore of the same period, although these Moto Goris never achieved the massive sales figures of those iconic Elsinores. Now, as far as I'm aware, Moto Gori never really manufactured their own engines, and down the years they used other manufacturers' motors to power their motorcycles, and in this bike's case they of course used the very popular German-made Sachs 125 two-stroke engine. Now, these were excellent little motors and were used in a multitude of different motorbikes down the years, including Ancelotti's, Aspes, DKW's, Garelli's, KTM's, and even the British-made Wassel had one of these Sachs engines to power it. But this particular Sachs 125 had a 7-speed gearbox, so you can imagine just how busy you would be shifting gears on this little screamer during a race, and just as to why you need all those cogs in a motocross machine, I'm not exactly sure, but my guess is that this little motor was also used to great success in Moto Gori's road racing bikes of the time, so I suspect that they just then slotted that particular motor into this motocross chassis. But again, the Sachs engine company was one of Germany's largest suppliers of two-stroke engines during the 50s, 60s and 70s, and they had a very good reputation for supplying rugged and reliable motorcycle engines during that period. Now, the Moto Gori chassis was just a tubular steel construction, and by all accounts it was pretty strong and very light, so it was well suited for a 125 off-road racer, and I can only imagine that it would have been quite a decent package combined with this relatively light Sachs engine. Now, once again, our Gori's fitted with quite a large 84 Bing carburetor, which is quite substantial for a little 125 motor, but then again, you're going to be far too busy trying to work out what gear you're actually in with this 7-speed gearbox than actually wondering how much fuel is flowing through that Bing carburetor, because there's plenty gears in this little motor to keep you occupied. Now again, because this is an Italian manufactured machine, locally sourced parts are normally used on these bikes, so I'm assuming that these are a pair of Italian made Marzocchi forks on the front, which of course a lot of these Goris did use back in the day, and they were very good suspension units, and once again used on a multitude of other bike manufacturers' models. Now, because this was still the early 1970s, drum brakes were still being used on motocross bikes, as those modern day hydraulic disc brakes were still a few years away from being the standard stopping systems for all off-road bikes. But these older drums were more than capable of slowing up this particular 125. Now, once again, our particular Moto Gori still has its original Reggio E Bertolini front and rear mudguards from the 1970s, which is quite a rare item. Now again, I'm guessing here once again that these 125s had an alloy fuel tank for that particular year, as of course with all little 125s such as these, the overall weight is key with these bikes, and every kilogram of weight that can be saved will go a long way to making the bike quicker and much more manoeuvrable on the track. Now, on the back end of the bike, once again a pair of Italian-made Marzocchi piggyback gas shocks. Now, these were quite good little units for their time, and they did offer a small range to make some adjustments to the rebound and dampening, and as far as technology goes, these were state-of-the-art for 1970s motocross, and they were well suited for these smaller 125s. But of course, other makes of suspension systems may have been fitted on these Goris back in the day. Now, the exhaust expansion chamber on our particular bike is the underslung variety, but I know that other Gori off-roaders did have the high level over the top of the engine type configuration on other models. But of course this pipe then leads onto this alloy tailpipe that I'm sure is not the correct part for this bike, but it still looks like it would do a decent job. But you have to remember that these are very rare models, so it's not really surprising that we're seeing a few non-original bits and pieces fitted to them. Although this replacement part certainly still gives it that older 1970s look. Now, as you can see, an alloy rear brake hub fitted onto the back of our 125, and I think also that the wheels and their associated brand new spokes have all been renewed during the bike's refurbishment. Now, quite a decent sized rear drive sprocket on our Moto Gori, and I'll wager that this little bike will certainly fly when it's being pulled along by that 7-speed gearbox, although it might not see top gear that often. And this looks like a quite comfortable seat on our refurbished bike, although this certainly looks like it's the real deal from the 1970s, as there can't be too many suppliers supplying replacement seat covers for these old Italian racers, so the chances are that this is still the very same one as was fitted to the bike at the Gori factory. Now again, a nice pair of alloy fork yokes on the top and bottom of the front of this bike, and the handlebars once again certainly look period correct for their time. Now in the bike's controls department, quite a good set of Magura levers here, and those lever covers, which of course are just to stop dust and dirt from getting into the cables and the lever pivots, and these are quite a good addition to just help keep all the crud and moisture out of the workings if it's a particularly wet race on the track. Although whether these were a standard fitment back in the day, I'm not entirely sure. Now the throttle gasser again is a Magura item, and this part will certainly get a workout keeping that little 125 two-stroke motor buzzing and on the pipe. Although a lot of the parts on this bike certainly underwent the full-on restoration treatment when Keith initially began the rebuild of this little bike, and although he never actually completed it himself, Terry then took on the project and finished the bike into the condition that you now see here. But in terms of its looks, you sure can't beat the Italians when it comes to pizzazz and style, and of course through the years they've made some of the world's nicest looking motorcycles. Okay, some of them may have not been very practical, but they were never short of aesthetic looks. Now, as to what this little bike was actually like to ride on a racetrack, I haven't a clue, and I've never really come across anyone who actually has had that pleasure. Although one thing's for sure, it would have been very quick with that little Sachs 125 two-stroke motor powering it, but your left foot would certainly be kept busy shifting the gears on that 7-speed gear train. But nevertheless, another rare Italian little pony, and a bike that you very seldom see on or off a racetrack, and these Moto Goris are even rarer as show bikes, as not a lot were actually made and very few were even sold, and that's why this particular little 125 is going to make another great addition to Terry's wonderful collection of old vintage dirt bikes. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that quite nice look around Terry Pickering's little Italian stallion, that little 125 Moto Gori. Certainly a bike that you never see these days, and you certainly don't see them racing on any racetracks, but nevertheless a lovely looking little machine. Okay, if you like what you see here on my channel, I do hope you will continue to subscribe, and of course that way every time I upload a brand new video you will be notified immediately, and of course you won't miss out on any future postings. But until then, of course, everybody continue to be safe and well until we all get together once again and talk about more of this kind of vintage iron right here on your #1 channel, Classic Dirt Bike TV.